Okay. All right, so we are live. This is the first time I've done a live stream in quite a while. And OBS has done some stuff with the audio mixer, which looks cool, looks intuitive, but I'm not 100% sure I understand. So, first off, if you can hear me okay, one in the chat or something like that. And then what we're going to do, I'm going to make sure. So, I'm not seeing any ones in the chat. So, if you can hear me, just a one in the chat. You should. There we go. Okay, I can hear myself. Now, you shouldn't be able to hear the static from either of the SDRs that we've got going on the side, but if I understand these correctly, I'm going to click a button, and you still can't hear them. I'm assuming. I'm assuming you haven't heard static so far, but if I click this button, you should hear static. Okay. So I'm not sure, but if that sounded right, if you just heard static right now, that means I understand the audio system and the configuration changes here. Yes, you hear static now. Perfect. All right. So I guess welcome to the year 2026 when it comes to additional buttons that OBS has added. All right. So I haven't done a live stream like this in a while. I've told you guys I don't even like doing live streams like this in a while. I think the last time I did one of these, I'm just like, this is it. I'm done. So why am I here live streaming? I guess it's just for the benefit, especially for those of you following me on X. I have begun vague posting. So first, if you're here, there are some questions at the very top of the chat. Trust me, everything will be answered, but I want to set up the context here. There is something taking place this week. There is something happening this week that matters, but I think some of you guys struggle. So let me say something up front. I don't want to be accused of any, freaking people out or whatever it is. But before I explain this, it's really important that I say something that I've said I don't know how many times in the past. A lot of this audience, and maybe do take that personally, maybe don't take that personally. Some of you guys maybe should on board some of this stuff, but especially if you've come from these other channels where, and I'm aware of an overlap, and you're aware of an overlap, where these other guys would tell you, oh my goodness, this thing that's going on is real. An ICBM just flew over my house. This is not a drill. And you guys ate that stuff up. Those guys were idiots. And I understand where it comes from, but I kind of also don't understand why people ever believed anything that they had to say. It doesn't pass the sniff test. Like, if you think about it for 10 seconds, it just doesn't make sense. So those guys would tell you nonsense is real and have no idea what they're talking about. And you should dismiss that. That is not true. And people used to ask me if I thought something was real, would I even be streaming? No, I would not be streaming. I would be calling my family. I would be, grabbing what I can, my bags of chips or, food from the fridge and stockpiling in the basement if I thought, the World War III was around the corner imminently. However, the portion of the audience that I'm concerned about, as soon as you guys hear the word exercise, you think that's it. Like, you tune out and it doesn't matter. And for the average person, It does not matter. It is not going to imminently affect your life. It is unlikely to imminently affect your life. Anyone telling you, you need to be prepared because of this is lying to you. They're trying to scare you into something. However, do not instantly tune out and think, oh, it doesn't matter. It's just an exercise. The United States military does exercises 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Of course they do. That is what the United States military does. However, a large part of OSINT, which is why I've developed such a problem with OSINT, and a lot of the audience, which I just became frustrated with you guys, it's like, it's not even fun doing these live streams. I don't like doing these live streams. There are scales of exercises, and there are scales of consequence of exercise, and this scale matters both in terms of interest, and I try and assume that, if you're on a channel like this, or if you're on those other channels or anything like that, I assume you're at least novelly interested in these. And rather than all the other exercises that take place, however many hours of the day, however many days of the week, however many weeks of the year, I am telling you that these ones are different. Able, if you're not familiar, I want to just say Able Archer 83 was an exercise. But if you're not familiar, that won't necessarily land. So in brief, Able Archer 83 was an exercise where, the US and NATO were just rehearsing, what do we do if the Soviet Union attacks us? And the Soviet Union was watching this exercise, and they knew there had been, presumably, I looked into this and it actually isn't directly spelled out, but presumably there had been an Able Archer 82, an Able Archer 81. Like, this also was a routine exercise, but the Soviet Union watched these exercises and they were freaked out about it because of the scale of the exercise. Now, I don't know if the exercises that we're looking at, whether it's the one that is taking place this week or any of the other ones that I've talked to you guys about over the last, how long have we been doing this together, friends? 3.5, 4 years. I don't know if any of those are the direct successor to Able Archer, or any of the other sorts of exercise on a large scale, nuclear implementation. But this is a big one. This matters. And if you think back, and certainly at least when I think back, and this is a little bit of speculation on my part, but I do think that these are large scale exercises that even if, allies and adversaries know that this exercise is coming up, I think they still get a little bit squirrely. I think people do get nervous, and I think particularly when you're talking about a nuclear exercise at this scale that is taking place, when did New Start expire formally? In February, I think, like early February. This is technically the second, I've been calling these Skymaster exercises, and I've told you guys, I don't think this is what the U.S. military calls it. They probably aren't saying this is a Skymaster exercise or a Skymaster event or any such nomenclature, but we don't know the names of these things, so I just call them that because most of them are not published. Some of them are, incidentally, like we know the exercises in October are Global Thunder, and that one happens to be what I call a Skymaster event. And that's also like a large scale one. So, as you guys know, over on X, I've been vague posting, and a few people have been talking about, somewhat fairly, they're saying, well, it's an exercise, right? And it's like, yeah, it's an exercise, but you're not listening to me. I'm not telling you misinformation by saying this matters, this is big. But some folks, and by the way, if you don't like vague posting, why are you responding to vague posting? There's a lot of these little social networking dynamics, and some people have told me as like a meaningful bit of advice that I don't come across well when I do this because it sounds like I'm lecturing you. But I am, in effect. I would like to lecture you right now, and if you tune out, that's fine. If you don't like vague posting, don't respond to vague posting. Because if you respond, even if it's negatively, that's engagement, and then that incentivizes people to vague post more. So it's funny when someone responds to something where I'm like, something big is happening this week, and I can post that. That's not a lie. That's not misinformation. And I like vague posting now because I realize it's pretty funny. Um, but people get mad and say, don't spread It's not misinformation. But you'll respond to that, and then there's other posts I'll make. Like I have an entire GitHub that I regularly link to. Is this going to pop up? I don't know what I've done. There we go. Like in my bio, and I regularly link to these posts. I don't know if this is going to work when I click this. Oh, man. I don't know. I've got to take a look at what's going on with the browser and OBS, but... Well, hold on. Let me do this. Like, I just meant to click one and have it for you as an example, but the new OBS is mad at me, or I'm mad at it. Here we go. Hold on. Stand by. Just an example. Like, I'll have a post being like, an EAM of this length broadcast today, and here's what it looks like. And that post will get like 600, 700 views or one repost. You guys, I appreciate it. I appreciate the endeavor, and I appreciate that some people recognize the value of it. But a lot of guys will not answer to a post like that. But if I respond, something big is happening, it gets reposted, it gets people angrily, replying to things, and that works. And Captain FAL has said something funny, which is, my replies are just for engagement. Wasn't actually. I don't think YouTube will let me say that word. Not the monetization matters. I make like 10 cents a stream if I have ads on. This one might have set them on by default. I don't know. I'd have to look later. But if you're seeing ads, I'm sorry. That's just what it does by default unless I turn it off. No, that's part of it too. And I think it's easier for some of you guys who understand the algorithm if I just give you something to play with. If I've given you the whole, question and answer and an entire thing, there's not much you can do except respond cool. You can respond cool. There's no reason you can't do that. But maybe I'll pause there because people do say I'm not allowed to lecture the audience. But yeah, if you don't like vague posters, don't respond to vague posters. And especially like if you are going to respond to vague posters because you don't like vague posters, and then you're not going to respond to like their sincere effort posts, you don't have a leg to stand on. So what are we vague posting about anyways? Well, the one thing that I did this week, there's a couple of things that I've done this week. There's a couple of things that I've done in the past. Now, is this going to let me click buttons? Okay, this is working. So this is, neatintel.github.io, or easier, what I did is I set up the hfgcs.com redirect to go to this page. This really shouldn't surprise you guys if you've been watching me for even a bit. The one thing I've been really interested in are these Skymaster events. And I have them, listed for 2023, 2024, 2025. In 2026, and I also set up like a nice comparison table for you guys. And if you go through the YouTube channel, if you click the playlist tab, most of these, the majority of these, I did, live streams and I captured them. And for quite a few of them actually early on, like I would come on and do, the live streams like this, where I come on and I comment and I say, wow, these messages are happening and they're moving to this frequency. And this is going on, and and this, that, and the other. And it was basically in service of putting together a table that looks exactly like this, which shows you that how often are these exercises happening, and then if you go and watch the live streams, you can get an idea of at least the impression we have right now, the scale of these exercises. But let me just point out what is hopefully obvious. They are fairly routine. So before I, put all this data together, some people were saying that they're quarterly. Well, they're obviously a lot more than quarterly. And then when I pointed out, no, you guys are wrong. Like, it's not quarterly. It's a little bit more than that. And then they changed, oh, it's monthly. I'm like, well, I don't have the data to say it's monthly. So if you're hearing something I'm not, I'd love to hear about it. But a lot of people guessing, right? They need to sound like they know what's going on, but they don't know what's going on, but they'll say something. And if you didn't have the data, you would have a hard time proving them wrong. But here we are, I have the data. And instead of being like, oh man, this neat intel guy is really on top of it, for the most part, it's easier to ignore neat intel and just keep doing whatever you were doing. But we'll talk about that in a bit. But I want to mention, for context here, yeah, this will be a lot of lecturing this live stream. You'll find out why I don't like doing these anymore. I covered for you guys the January 2026 Skymaster, but at that point I said, I'm bored of this. I'm not having fun doing this. It's getting frustrating. Because a lot of the audience, basically just toggles between either you fall for some idiot telling you it's real, or I tell you it's an exercise, and then you just assume like it's any old exercise that doesn't really matter. And I can explain, well, hold on, ladies and gentlemen, because they're literally practicing World War III. Like, they're practicing nuclear war. But they're gone. They heard exercise. They don't care. So it wasn't fun. So I did not monitor this. And what I did for February was I said, well, listen, you guys, you have an entire OSINT apparatus. All of the Twitter is dedicated to open source intelligence. You have these forums online, these secret forums that despite, my 3.5, 4 years of doing this stuff, I never got invited to these secret forums. And a few people went into Nate like, oh, well, I'm from this secret forum and we don't like you because you're such a jerk. And it's like, okay, I don't care. You don't have to like me. And I said, okay, fine. I will not monitor this Skymaster. I will, post a few hints saying there's probably going to be a Skymaster soon, but I will leave it to the brain trusts that have said that they can do it without me to monitor this Skymaster. And what happened on February 11th, the day of, so I'm going to do other things. I'll poke my head and I'll see what you guys, manage to, put together. Very little. Very little. So one thing was interesting. On YouTube, the usual suspects did not do their live streams telling you guys that the world is going to end. Because, as I suspected, those guys have guys that watch my channel, and they don't engage with it. They don't support the channel. They don't subscribe. They don't say anything to the Ko-Fi. They don't engage with my posts. They basically just sit there and steal information. And because I didn't spoon feed it for them and say, today, February 11th, 2026, is going to have a Skymaster event, they weren't able to, so they didn't do those live streams. You didn't have, I hate saying their names, but you know who I'm talking about. You didn't have Greg or Lee or any of these other guys, shouting at you, oh man, this is not a drill. Like, you didn't have that. They didn't go on. And I knew that would happen. And I've talked about how that does bother me. Like, I didn't get into this for the money. But when you realize someone is just, sitting there on your channel so that they can go and turn it around for another audience and make, $500 a night, that's not good. I don't like being part of that. Give me 1 second here, because obviously that one SDR has, which one is that? Not that one. There we go. That's back to normal. This one. What was I saying? Yeah, so those guys didn't do their live streams, and I knew that would happen. I have a bad feeling about that for any number of reasons. But more importantly, the Open Source Intelligence Brain Trust, whether it was on Twitter, whether it was on Blue Sky, or whether it was on, this secret forum, I don't even know what it's called. I would name it, but I don't actually know what it's named. I don't care. Because I don't want to be part of it, specifically because those guys missed it. They missed there was a nuclear exercise, a major large-scale nuclear exercise that happened February 11th, 2026, and nobody talked about it. They if you were on the timeline that day, the only thing you saw was a few posts from me kind of throwing shade at people, kind of making fun of them and saying, "Well, of course you messed this up." Because for whatever reason, maybe I'm a jerk. Again, like, I can be a jerk. You don't have to like me, but I more than set things up. Like, this date was not present there, right? But you sort of saw, well, the last out of two of the last 3 years that we know of, there were two nuclear exercises in like the first week of February. I must guess those are like both on Tuesdays or Wednesdays. And I've said, there's a little bit of wiggle room, but if it's not this Wednesday, then it's probably the next Wednesday. And I left it. And those guys missed it. And I said, nobody's got any recordings? Nope. Nobody has anything? Nope. I looked around. What did people post about? There was a B-52 that flew over the Pacific Ocean, and I won't say who it is because they're a nice enough guy. I had some problems with them later on. But someone did notice some B-52s, and they said, oh, this must be flying to Guam. They don't fly to Guam for nuclear exercises. That's straight. That's not happened before. They don't do it they don't on the same day. They do have the Mercury 6Bs that will fly to Europe or Greenland or something, but they'll do that a few days ahead of time. And this is like a highly respected account, and I think they're fine. I don't want to name them because I do think they're an okay person, but it's just look at how many of these exercises I have documented over since 2023. And put together, and when people ask questions about them, I explain them to people, and I say, this is what they are, this is what they're doing. I am pretty sure that they are practicing the opening salvos of World War III. Like, if you want a nuclear war to happen, this is what it would look like. This is what it would sound like on the radio. This is not something you just, miss. But open source intelligence just basically looks at stuff and says, oh, does this have to do with the thing we're interested in right now? So I think in early February, everyone was anticipating an attack on Iran by way of B-52s stopping in Guam and then going to Iran. So anything they saw that day must be going to Guam. And, open source intelligence, we all, clap and say, oh boy, these guys are so smart. You have to follow this account. This guy, oh my goodness, he's followed by a high ranking military guy or a guy who apparently used to be like US intelligence. That must mean he's correct. And by the way, this was around the same time you had that Twitter rando thing. And if you're not familiar, what basically happened was, some high-ranking member of the U.S. military was, giving some sort of an interview about Operation Midnight Hammer and other topics, and she just said, by way of, illustrating some of the unexpected complications or issues that came as part of that exercise, she just said, people on social media will do a lot of stuff that in the past, we wouldn't be used to seeing that level of detail, that level of research from anyone who isn't actually a member of the military, like a member of intelligence. And that's all she said. But she's when she was talking about these people, she said that, Twitter randos, and I'm heavily paraphrasing here, but, verbatim, Twitter randos are causing us problems. And all of open source intelligence threw their hands up in the air and said, how dare you? You can't say that. Twitter randos, really? In acting like this was a total faux pas that she shouldn't have said, and she needs media training, and how dare she, and she looks like a fool. And I thought, what do you want? What are you talking about? Where is this coming from that you are getting offended with a woman saying this is a problem? And part of it is she's probably not even talking about most of you. Because like I just said, it's not comprehensive, really impressive intelligence. Even these accounts with 100,000 followers, 200,000 followers, A lot of them are just aggregates, and that's fine. That's providing a value. A lot of people, I would like to follow this one account that's telling me about, general news I'm not throwing shade at that. I'm just saying you are not who's causing an issue. She's not even complaining about you to start with. Why are you getting offended? Um, and I don't even know if she's necessarily complaining about someone like me. But, when you look at like this table of like these exercises, and when you look at me like throwing up, tracking all these planes that are effectively, doomsday planes, and tracking, their flight patterns and stuff, especially when it's really obvious that they kind of don't want to be seen anymore. I think I'm not saying that I think I am one of those people that she'd be complaining about, but I would think I would have more of a leg to stand on to assume she must be complaining about someone like me. And I would just be like, yeah, of course I'm a problem. Like, of course she's gonna complain. Like, this is not, it's not like a major security issue. I don't know if you guys, if anyone watching right now remembers, but like, or if you've ever gone back and watched some of the old videos, but I did used to have a disclaimer on my videos, which was basically to the effect of, um, if this channel is a problem for the U.S. military, obviously you guys can just, go through the Digital Millennium Copyright Act in like bad faith and just copyright strike the videos to, just delete my presence from the internet. But I also said something like, um, if I get a, email from a credible looking U.S. military address, so it's like, Air Force dot whatever, and I look this person up, in my head I was like, well, I may ask to speak to the person on the phone just to verify this isn't a prank phone call or a prank email. But if they're just like, we would like you to take this down, I would take it down. I I I do not perceive what I'm doing or have ever done to be like actual security issue for the United States military. But if it what, like I'm not in, if there is some complication, I'm not anticipating. I don't want to cause them problems. And like if I am a Twitter rando that's causing them a problem, I'm not going to get offended. Like there is no reason for the United States military to like have to refer to, you know, any of us by name and be like, oh, we have to regard the. No, we're Twitter randos. What are you talking about? So that was happening around the same time, and that was pretty much, over the past year. There have been a number of little things where I said, "This is not so fun. This is not so fun." So that's whether that was a little bit before or a little bit after. I don't know whether it kind of informed the decision to, say, well, we'll see how you guys do with monitoring a Skymaster event on your own. Um, or whether it was kind of afterwards, like, well, there you go. But whatever the case, just to go back to that, the February Skymaster, there was nobody captured anything that day from the OSIM Brain Trust, the secret forums that don't want to reveal themselves. And I obviously didn't get anything. But I do have a rule of thumb, which is to say something to the effect of, if there's no audio, like if you have no evidence, that you can't say that it didn't happen. Now, I have to quickly go back here in the replies because it turned out when I was talking about this a day or two later, or maybe even like a week later, one account ended up having a recording. And that account is, I don't know how to pull it up on screen right now. I can try and pull it up on screen, but I don't have the post bookmarked or anything, so you'll have to bear with me. This may not work. Okay, it did work. So I don't have it bookmarked, but Jessie here, if this lets me scroll, she's got to go fund me and stuff, but she ended up posting recordings of a recording of a Skymaster audio. And some of you guys ended up, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to scroll through. I'm talking about something that was posted in February. But she has a recording, so I was thinking I would post a video on the channel here to maintain it, but that's fine. I don't always have to do everything and have everything on the channel. So maybe at some point I will maybe make a video linking to it or archiving or some way or another. But yeah, I pretty much said, well, you guys put together what you can, and one person grabbed audio, And the whole brain trust couldn't find that post when left to their own devices, other than me complaining about it a week or two later. So it's a good job on Jesse, but it's kind of like a bad job for all of us collectively in sort of pointing out, like, and by the way, I'm excusing myself here right now. Like, I actively said I'm not going to do it. I'm pretty sure there's going to be one. And if you look at the table I made, like, I do excuse myself. It's just sort of, it's unimpressive for all these guys who are like, oh, I've monitored the HFGCS for 40 years. I know more about this than you do, Pipsqueak. It's like, okay, you do? Then why do you keep missing this stuff? Like, I told a few of these guys, like, be quiet. You shouldn't say that. And they think, like, I'm saying that in a sense of, like, I'm jealous or, like, mad or, like, seething. Or it's like, no, like, for your own, like, reputation, don't say that you monitored the HFGCF for that long and don't know about this stuff, because it's one of two things. It's either you're lying and giving yourself away, or, wow, you're really bad at this, so don't mention it. Like, you monitored the HFGCS for like this long and weren't able to put this together. Like, just. And as far as I know, I don't believe that I'm talking about anyone who is watching this live stream right now. I'm talking about more people who have like already blocked me, whether it's on Twitter or some of these. I'm on a secret forum, and we don't like you guys, and it's like, okay, oh, like, again, you don't have to like me, but for God's sake, it's a miss on your part. And by the way, if you look at this chart, I'm kind of wondering, and this would be one where I would say, like, I would be responsible here. Isn't it conspicuous that for 3 of the last 4 years, we have evidence of Skymaster events in February, but not in 2025? And, like, I'm very happy there to say, you know what? I bet I missed one. Or, like, not with absolute confidence, but with a decent amount of confidence to be able to say, maybe I missed one. And then that sort of, invites the same thing where there's other months where it's like, maybe there were, none of these are good examples here. I mean, yeah, there's no easy example, but it's fine. It's just, maybe there are other events that are missed. And I've been saying for the last few years, you need, if you're really interested in this stuff, you need more than one guy who's obsessively doing this, or 2 guys who are obsessively doing this. Like, you need a team of guys monitoring multiple frequencies in different parts of the world. I think, was it in February where I tuned in to... I didn't find this on my own. I think Bellerophon is in the chat box right now. I think he figured out that they were on 13200 kilohertz because they said something on one of the HFGCS frequencies, and then he tuned over and heard it. I said, I wonder about that. And then the next week, I just had a recording going for 13200 kilohertz, which, as far as anyone knows, was the last used by the HFGCS in 2020. And I captured something again, even though they didn't say anything on the primary frequencies. Now, I think I listened for another week and didn't hear anything, but that would be an example where it's like, well, are we really assuming that nobody used that frequency for the last 6 years, or is it just nobody was paying attention to that frequency for the last 6 years? And my assertion, whenever these sorts of events have come up, has been, and because that was a tangent, just to sort of say, we don't have absolute confidence that there wasn't a Skymaster event in 2025, especially when you look at everything else that's going on in a wider context. Maybe there was one and we missed it. And that's okay. Like I said, to capture this stuff, you would basically need a team, and we don't have a team. But I've always butted heads with these guys who have this sort of like a selection bias problem and say, well, there wasn't one. Whether it was in February 2025 or, I don't know, June 2020, what I'm trying to say. And I try and like have conversation with those sorts of people civilly, but they take it personally, and then that makes it tough for that conversation to proceed in a civil manner. But let's talk a little bit more about today, about right now, about this week, and I don't know if I'll be able to easily pull up my X account. Maybe I can. It doesn't matter. Let's take a look at the passwords page. And give me just 1 second here. Sorry about that. So the password page. Over on X, I've been posting. Let me. How do I do this? Well, neatintel.github.io. I've got to pull up the X. Because if I just say it, how's that? It's not going to work. That's too hard to write down. We're done with this page anyways. So I'm assuming you guys are following me on X. Oh no, these are not my most recent posts. I have to be logged in. I can't log in. These are my most popular posts? This is crazy. This is when you're not logged in. Instead of showing like the most recent posts, it just shows your most popular posts. Yeah, I'm not going to find it this way. How do I... What the hell is this post? Oh, it's a good post. All right, so that won't work. neatintel.github.io/password.html. I've been posting about it on X. I've been giving you guys some hints about what some of the passwords are. One of the videos I post, actually, if you bother to type out what you hear in the video, it gives you a password page with all of the relevant passwords. But there's a little bit of a, we can call it, it's not exactly a choose your own adventure, but there's multiple passwords. And they all lead in different directions. So, for example, if you type in Skymaster, because that kind of sounds like a, obviously I'm talking about Skymasters, and you think, oh, I bet that's what the password is. It loads a page, but there's no data. And, you can zoom out, you can look around. It has the HFGCS stations marked, but, like, there's nothing else going on. And it says here, like, there's no data. So... you might think, well, is that it? No, that's not it. So you try another password. Sky King. And you wait a little bit and it starts giving you, like, what is this? These are song lyrics. And if you look up, who's performing this song, it gives you a little bit of a hint. But also more straightforward. I think it's less straightforward, actually. But if you find the name of the song, and then you refresh the page, the name of the song is Off the Record. I don't know what this one is. Oh yeah, this one. So that's a code, and if you know what to do with that code, that's telling you the password. There are multiple passwords. It's meant to be fun. It's meant to be vague posting peak. But if you type in the password, there's a couple functioning passwords. I'll tell you no, I'm not going to tell you either of them. Figure it out. But what's the one I want to do? So let's look. One of the passwords gives you what's going on right now. One of the two passwords. And this one is hard because there's no active hints. But... if you feel comfortable, you can ask me for the password. And I'll just decide whether to give it to you or not. But what is this map? What are we looking at right now? I don't know if this one will let me do it. No, I have to use the other one. Refresh. This is the one a few of you have figured out. Some have figured it out very quickly. I was surprised, but I gave more than enough hints that it wasn't too surprising. So we've got a timeline going. Obviously, you're not seeing any planes right now, but you sort of see this thing scrolling through, and these things are lighting up. Yeah, I've given multiple hints to hints. And in one case, I pretty much gave you, like, verbatim the password to something that tells you all the other passwords. So all the other passwords except one. But that's fine. This is one of the ones that's given to you. And you see this thing like quickly firing through. And by the way, you can click the bar and it pauses. 2404160248. So we're a little should be able to pull this back. No, that's too late. So this is right now. So what are these things lit up? These are airspace reservations, and we've talked about these in the past on the channel. I've done multiple live streams, and I've said in the past verbatim, I would not know a darn thing about them if it wasn't for PDGLS. I have no problem shouting out channels that are, helpful. So PDGLS, by the way, while I'm shouting out channels, I have to make sure to shout them out again. But Wolf Nev has shouted me out a few times the past few days. He's also shouted me out multiple times over the, last couple of years here and there. But yeah, in the last couple of days especially, because I've been lurking in his, he's got his live stream now on like X and on YouTube. So sometimes I'll pop my head in. He's a chill guy. So I should reciprocate that. NEVE, Wolf NEVE. He's got like the VTuber thing going on. It's pretty neat. Is this working? So that's the airspace reservations. What do these matter? So these are areas where there are regularly airspace reservations. Mercury E6Bs, the Doomsday planes, the ones that broadcast the EAMs. This is where they usually fly. This is where those airspace usually are made. And this is roughly what they look like. They're reserved from surface area to however much, because there's sometimes that, they put the wire out, and the wire is very long, so they have to reserve the airspace so nobody gets hit by the wire. That's good, and that's fine. But if there's airspace reservations all the time, why did I do this whole, song and dance and, there's a password page, and if you don't know the password, you can't see it. Like, why am I being a jerk a little bit about all this? And that's because there is something conspicuous about these airspace reservations. They are more than, the average airspace reservation is like 2 or 3 hours long. They're very efficient with their time. They're not booking any more than they need to. They get in there, they do their thing for a couple hours, they get out. Airspace reservation expires shortly after, that's it. These are 24-hour airspace reservations. And these airspace reservations on the other side right now are not active, but you'll see a couple of them are longer than usual. Some of them are normal, some of them are long. And there's also reservations for the Gulf of America, but those are harder for me to code in because those are hosted on a different page, and they also are so far not sticking out. Now, what's the take home with these reservations right now? Well, right now, at this point in time, I don't see anything that screams to me that, tonight, well, it depends where you are in the world, but tonight, for the continental U.S. tonight, Wednesday, April 15th, and most of these Skymaster events are on Wednesdays. You do have some conspicuous air, like these are 24 hours long, aren't they? Yeah, this is 24 hours long. This is 24 hours long. That's conspicuous. And maybe something happens, but I wouldn't bet on it right now because there's not much going on over here. These are not active yet. And you can sort of see the timeline, and it tells you like when are they active, because this roughly corresponds to the current point in time. There are some long ones, but nothing crazy. There's not enough, if you like. There's nothing on the East Coast that's active right now, so it's probably not right now. But it sticks out because I apologize for being repetitive. Not that. If you look at the time of the year, boy, it is conspicuous that you have these very long airspace reservations around the same time you might expect an exercise, because it is a hallmark of most of the previous exercises. There are some that are smaller in scale, and those would be harder to pick out. But a lot of them will do this thing where it's like, for multiple days in a row, there are these 24-hour airspace reservations They're very strange. It's not what it normally looks like when you go and look up airspace reservations. So, oops, we've got something. We might as well try and listen.
5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Main sail test count out.
So it's just a test count. That's fine. That's not anything. Well, it's something, but that is just a test count. Oh, that reminds me of something. Maybe I'll go back to that if there are questions or something at the end. But someone remind me about the spellcaster stuff at the end. But that is sort of another potential lecture. What was I saying? Right, these airspace reservations. And let me refresh this again so I can input the other password. So this is actually toggled to right now. No, I did need the other one. I apologize. The other thing, if you pause this, when you figure out the password and access this page, when you pause it, there are these little arrow buttons that you can click, and this sort of staggers to different points. And you'll sort of see, like, what's the maximum number of, these weird airspace reservations that you can see active at the same time. And boy, isn't this starting to stick out. February 17th. February 18th. At that time, pretty late. Now, there aren't enough airspace reservations. It's possible they will, book a few more of these long airspace reservations, but it's possible that, they decide not to do this exercise, and I'll comment on that in a moment, but we are definitely in that period where when you look at the dates of previous exercises, when you look at all of these weird airspace reservations that are now being made, so it's not looking like it's tonight, but it's probably over the next few days or so. And the reason I wanted to do this live stream tonight is I'm sort of looking ahead and thinking, I'm going to be too busy for this over the next few days. I can try and leave the streams running, but the power goes out. Let me explain what I mean by that. So obviously, I mean, for most of the continent, even right now, we've had some thunderstorms the last few days. We've had some. I've had a tornado warning recently. So thunderstorms, tornadoes. The power might get knocked out. You're thinking, okay, like, what are you talking about? How does that interrupt the live stream? You can just turn it back on. I have to be near the computer to turn that back on. I've got some stuff planned, so it's not like Neat Intel in the past. Literally, the channel is named Neat Intel for a reason. Look that up if you're not sure what Neat stands for. But not that I'm not a Neat, but I don't have as much time as I used to. So if the power goes out, I'm not able to make it a top priority. Like, scramble back and turn the computer back on and keep the live stream going. And I might actually be this weekend driving out. And the other thing I mentioned in a previous Twitter space and some other stuff, this is turning into a little bit of a procrastination problem for me. Because if there's something I should be working on, if I have the live stream going, then I find I end up like poking my head and checking the stream a little bit more than usual. And it's, a few minutes here, a few minutes there. And now, I've been doing this live stream for you guys for the past, it adds up very quickly. There's other stuff I can be doing. And as I've been kind of intonating and hinting, this isn't very fun anymore. It's not that I don't find it interesting. I find this stuff interesting. Like I said, this is what World War III would probably sound like, and that's insane. But I can find this interesting. But where is it? There's not much incentive for me to post this stuff online. And I've got the Ko-Fi link in the corner, but realistically, like, we're beyond that. No one's gonna make enough. I'm not gonna get like an anonymous benefactor giving me, enough money where it's like, oh, I can cancel the stuff I have planned this weekend. So, so that's kind of the point of a live stream, which is sort of, I don't feel like I have to prove anything anymore. That's part of the motivation, right? Is um, putting this together and saying, when I started this stuff off, I said I feel like you guys don't know what you're talking. A lot of these, know-it-alls. You sort of let them talk, and it's like, I don't know what you're talking about, but it doesn't sound like you know what you're talking about. And that's where we're at. And when I leave people to their own devices, if they miss these things, that's fine. But if the event had been tonight, that would have been great. I happened to have time. I would have done the live stream. It would have been rah rah rah. Look, the intel is right again. But if it ends up being tomorrow or friends, if the stream is going great, if it's not going, that's fine. I am fairly confident in what I've put together, and if these guys in their secret forums and the discords and whatever, I don't know, man. I had fun vague posting. If I have time to vague post, I will vague post, and you guys can get up. Not all you guys, but some guys, if they get upset about it, I don't care. I think it's funny. I think some people had some fun out of it, but it's not a priority for me right now, is what I'm saying. Because I've captured more than enough of them. I got nothing, to prove. If anything, I feel like those guys need to prove themselves to me. And when you talk to some of these people, it's, we're on very different islands, if you like. So that's not happening anytime soon. I have no illusions that anyone feels, that they need to prove themselves to me. So that's sort of what I would encourage you if you're interested in this stuff. There is so much information I have given you. I understand. Just to, I guess, reiterate a point. There is so much information I've given you. You cannot. I know some of you guys were just replying for the bands, and I appreciate that. But anyone who's like, you're vague posting, you're not giving us enough information. I have given you more than enough information. I have given you so much here that you can use. I actually refined one of these calendars today. If this is going to open, this is not going to open. It never opens when I try and click it through the stupid browser in OBS. But I promise you, if you try and click these things in your browser on a desktop, a lot of this is not optimized for a laptop computer. Or sorry, it's fine for a laptop. It's just not fine for mobile. Some of the pages I tried to optimize for mobile, but some of them it just can't be done. This is one that is not so nice looking on mobile. But what I will say is, if you look at this calendar right now for April, there's stuff you can do here. What broadcast today? I think 164 character message. If you look through this stuff and compare when 164 character messages have broadcast in the past, there is no smoking gun. If there was, I would just share it with you. But there's enough there where, I'm not sure, but I sort of see something. That's, today, 164 character message broadcast today. And, if you hide these things, you open them. There's something there somewhere that says maybe. And if this is an indicator of anything, it's probably not happening. We can rule out today, I'm fairly certain. But maybe tomorrow, I would say probably not. Friday's a maybe. Saturday's a maybe. And that's what motivated me to make this stream, which is I am most likely not going to be, with you this Saturday, as it were. Not that I'm actively present for the live streams or anything, but if you're interested in this stuff, look at what's going on and understand something big is happening. And I can't tell you about it, but I know something that not a lot of people. We got some noises.
1, this is Mainfield, test count out.
Yeah, they're just doing test counts. That's fine. They can do all the test counts they want. So a couple things I wanted to mention, and then we can kind of go through any questions and stuff that you guys have. I've already mentioned this, but these exercises are sort of even more interesting than while I've been monitoring them. Like, this is sort of an unfortunate point at which to say, I'm not keen on doing this so much anymore because it's becoming less fun. Because we are post start. And it is sort of interesting to be like, well, what are they going to do now? In the sense of what will be the scale of these exercises. And if I can tie this into another point, in terms of like, how do you support neat intel? Sometimes it's just sort of like, if you're interested in this stuff, like, there's a lot of things where I end up thinking about this stuff a lot. And then I have these thoughts or these guesses or these ideas, and it's like, why doesn't this occur to anyone else? So I don't think there are any E6s airborne right now. And if they were, I'd have a hard time filtering for them. But for the last year and a half, we've sort of been running into this problem where the Mercury E6Bs are no longer making themselves visible or like known easily on these flight trackers. So sometimes they're using fake hex codes, and people don't like me saying fake hex code, but I'm going to say them anyways because it's my live stream, and I can say whatever they want. So they're using fake hex codes, which makes it hard to track them. And sometimes, if they ping on ACARs, you can sort of do some backtracking and figure out which E6B it was, but also what does that really matter? I don't know, but I like doing it anyways, and no one else does that, and that's sort of fine. But that's one of those things, that takes 5 or 10 minutes to figure out which E6 is which. That's one way you could support the channel, so I'm not doing everything myself. And some people do some things, but it's sort of like, well, why isn't there, a fourth or a fifth guy doing some of this? Why is it just a handful of us? Because you're not really. But something else with the E6 is it's a very compelling timeline when you look through my tracking of the Mercury E6Bs, especially when it got to the point where I actually had like an active map on the live streams, which is showing, where are these 6Bs when these EAMs are going off. Because obviously they're broadcasting some of them, so I put that map on the screen. And then a few months later, they start dropping off the radar. And then I can't remember which, maybe it was the January 2025. No, it wouldn't have been. Maybe it was either a late 2024 or an early 2025 where I did a live stream like this with you guys, and I was almost, I don't even remember it enough to paraphrase, but at some point during that live stream, I was just like openly sort of like laughing and really bemused at the fact that it's so easy to track these planes during these exercises. And I didn't mean it to like make fun of the U.S. military or anything, but it's almost like boasting. Like, I need intel. I figured, these E6Bs out to the point that I can, predict even like down to the hour what's going to happen during some of these exercises. And then like the very next one or something shortly after, I put out like a YouTube video having to be like, it's become very hard to track these E6Bs. What I mean it's not that I'm the one advancing this idea, but other people have said this to me. And it's a very compelling timeline. It's a very compelling idea. And I'm not trying to like absolve responsibility. Like, if I was such a pain for the U.S. military, again, like that's not what it is. But I try and not think of myself as a protagonist or major player in this open source intelligence game. So I would encourage people to think, rather than, me or these channels that you happen to watch happen to be a problem, there's a wider scope where these nuclear proliferation treaties expired. Yeah, so it formally expired early this year, but it was also effectively suspended back in 2022 because Russia sort of said, well, we're not playing this game anymore. And perhaps over the last few years, the U.S. military has sort of been phasing down how much information is available for these exercises. Not so much for you and me, but for anyone monitoring it in terms of the intelligence or military agencies of whether it is, a Russian intelligence, Korean intelligence, Chinese intelligence, Iranian intelligence, all these countries that that we don't like, whether it's those guys or even our allies, the United States might be playing a game where it's like, well, we're slowly going to make it less obvious what's going on during these exercises in terms of what is the scale of them, what is the scope of them, because if there's not going to be a cap or an agreed to threshold or limit on nuclear proliferation going forward, then they're going to want to change the game, and they won't necessarily want you to know how much they've changed the game. So rather than automatically assuming that the E6Bs are sort of dropping off the radar because neat intel was bugging them, there's a bigger game. There's other stuff going on. And maybe it is going to start becoming a lot harder to monitor these exercises, which tells you, by the way, that during the period they were easy to monitor, all of these open source guys really struggled with monitoring, right? Like, if you go back and be like, what did this account that I follow post about the E6B activity or anything military activity on previous Skymaster dates, even like this week. So we know there's a major exercise going. Like, this is not me guessing. Did I show you guys this? Yeah, I didn't want to show you this earlier because people, as soon as you say exercise, they say, oh, that's it. It's not a big deal. This is a big exercise. And I told some people online, like I posted about this last week, like Offutt Air Force Base notified the general public that there's going to be a large-scale exercise this week. So we know there's an exercise. Like that's not a question. But I saw people posting about the B-52s both today and yesterday. And again, like, I don't have a big problem with these guys, so I'm not going to name them. And like, it's not a name and shame thing. And, if you're going to, like, look them up, it's just don't throw everything at them. Like, they're just a symptom of the larger problem here. It's not any one person. But one guy saw the B-52s today and yesterday, and he's like, oh, they're flying to Iran. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Like, why would you expect them to fly to Iran when there's a major exercise going on right now? Like, why is this your first assumption? So, and this is, well, it's easy. It's getting harder, but, like, this is still easy. There's more than enough hints. Like, I don't have a military background. I'm not, like, secretly, like an agent disseminating information. I'm not, like, secretly an adversary. There's no incentive to post other than the frustration. It's easy. And people still struggle with this stuff. So, what was the point that I wanted to make here? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's, what was the point I wanted to make? I forget where that tangent came off of. I generally don't remember. What do we want to take a look at? Let's see. Is this going to let me go back to the index? No. Oh, it did. Okay, cool. But how come when I click these, it won't open? It doesn't matter. Did you guys know I hit a secret? Look at that. If you hover over the 46, it turns purple. All the other ones are blue. That one turns purple. It doesn't mean anything. It just looks cool. I mean, it does mean something, but, like, it's not, there's nothing. Why won't this? I don't think there's anything particular about the 46. Oh, and by the way, like, this is so easy. like this is me more than halfway meeting, the wider audience. Like every one of these pages should be like K-pop videos with like all of these messages and structures like embedded inside like the frames, which I can make a music video and like convert it to like ASCII art, and just have these like colorized frames. And there's so many ways that I thought, like, how do I want to present this information? um I'll be honest, every way I thought it would have been very difficult to do. I knew how to do it, but it would take a lot of time. So I figured I will meet you guys more than halfway for the first time ever, and I will just give you the information. There you are. Like I think someone mentioned in the chat, there are 2 pages here if this loads. It's not loading, but if you try and access the call sign calendar or the call sign index, you get 404 pages, and that's because I'm actively trying to think of how do I turn that information into some sort of like audio visual assault or pleasant. I don't know. I haven't figured out what I want to do. That's the main thing. I don't know what I want to do, but I know I've given you more than enough stuff. But at least for that thing, it's going to be something else. If I ever I might not get around to it. There's a couple things where I'm like, you got to accept you're not going to get around to everything you want to do. By the way, I have no idea how many people are watching. I have no idea how many people I've lost or gained, yelling or rambling. The thing with YouTube is like you have to stream for, like an hour or two, and you have to try and like keep the audience you've got right now. And then, when 10 people tune in, that gets recommended on more front pages. Then people see, oh, 10 people are tuned in. Maybe I'll look. And then, there's 15 people. And then there's a network effect. But you have to live stream for so long. You have to do this for so much. I don't feel like doing it. So this is not me trying to set records. I don't even tell me how many, because you're gonna be like 8 people are tuned in watching. I'm like, oh, why am I doing this? So don't tell me. But one thing I want to throw up on screen here before I forget. So I think he's even streaming right now. That's Wolf. Like I said, he's chill. He does more of the straightforward streaming. He does the news. He does, the current events. He does the stuff I don't feel like doing. And he's got a VTuber profile. And I went back. I don't know if you guys remember the VTuber profile, like little, animated thing I was doing, but I was like, oh, that is a little bit weird. The way I was executing it, but his is normal. It's just he's got a nice little thing, and he talks the news, and he's got his audience. He's a chill guy, so check that out. And I mean, obviously, I do not have to like shout out Steve Lookner. You guys know who Steve Lookner is, and Lord Almighty, it's ridiculous that a man who was a Seinfeld writer figured out I'll have more of a career if I turn news into entertainment. But he's constantly on. I think he should be neat intel because he's obviously not much up to much else. But people don't respond to that. I bet you if this was a streamer, like I'd been willing to face docs and put on a tie and something, but I don't feel like doing that. So I didn't do that. Another thing I thought where I'm like, well, people want, you have to be a little personable. People would like to know who they're chatting with. And, I've been fairly dodgy or non-committal on my politics. I've done a few posts over the last couple months, hinting where I might be, what my views on things are. And it's like, that's not, I'm so politically idiosyncratic. I'm not going to make any friends that. And even if I was more defined, it's like, well, you lose 50% of your audience doing that, and I don't think you should do that anyways. So there's been a couple hints. I do like Robert McNamara. That was that's interesting. In fact, I can ramble about Robert McNamara for a bit. He was the United States Secretary of Defense during. He's like most well known for being, and a lot of people don't like him for his involvement in the Vietnam War because he was sort of seen as Robert McNamara's war, and he had all the bad ideas. But he also did other bad things. He was involved in the firebombing of Japan, which people don't know about, and I genuinely would consider to be a war crime. He was involved, he was president of the World Bank for something like 20 years after he resigned as defense secretary or was fired or whatever the case was. He doesn't know either. I think he was fired, but um, I think his tenure as president of the World Bank ended up having a lot of second order negative effects that people don't really talk about. But he's a very interesting character, um, because for at least some of these things, he had very strong mea culpas and was very self aware about what he was doing. And it's very interesting. If you have not watched The Fog of War, it's a documentary, it's a little under 2 hours. And it's set up as an interview. So if you're familiar with Errol Morris, the director, or if you're not, he's very good at interviewing people. It's a very interesting interview, and he crops out the best parts of it, along kind of intertwined with the movie that basically tells you who is Robert McNamara, what was his life, from childbirth all the way to, I think it was filmed in 2003 and he passed away in 2009. So most of this man's life, and particularly his endeavors after his tenure as defense secretary and president of the World Bank, to sort of pass on the lessons that he learned. And he's a very intelligent man, despite all his mistakes. He's a very self-aware man, but he ended up becoming very keen on putting an end to nuclear proliferation. And when you listen to Robert McNamara talk about nuclear proliferation, not so much in the film, but in some of the supplementary interviews he's done over the years, very thoughtful man, very empathetic man. I don't know if I agree with the entirety of his reading of the world, especially morally, but he's a very interesting man, and it was very concerning to me to listen to his interpretation and why he feels the world needs to get away from nuclear proliferation, and not in like a naive like kumbaya way, like we'll just everyone get rid of all the nuclear weapons and we'll all be happy, we'll all live happily ever after. But I'm listening to this person who I'm very inclined to have like a respect for, and his advice effectively he means to pass something on to you and I and future generations. And I came to the conclusion as I'm listening to his thoughts on nuclear proliferation, this doesn't apply anymore, what he's saying, because I think most of the my guess, this is a guess, uh, my guess is a non-trivial amount of senior members of the U.S. military, and I would guess even among you and me, you guys watching the stream right now, we harbor the suspicion that nuclear war is winnable. I think the way we look at the world has changed. I think, and I think it is. I think nuclear war is winnable. Um, I don't think that the way we understand one nuclear weapon or like 10 nuclear weapons would usher in a nuclear winter that would destroy the world. We must do everything that we can to avoid ever using nuclear weapons. I think our thinking around the topic has changed, and it's actually quite detrimental and unfortunate that the what are those guys called with the nuclear, the International Bulletin of the Atomic Science. I don't know. You know what I'm trying. Those guys with the clock. It's 85 seconds to nothing. Those guys. It's unfortunate that they sort of trivialize themselves over the last I don't know how many years into just sort of being yeah okay guys, like nobody cares. You're just doing this for funding or for attention. I think it's quite unfortunate because we are actually quite close in terms of the risk, in terms of what we're looking at, in terms of what is on your screen right now. The chance that this system gets used, and the chance the chance the system gets used in the way that it was designed for, I believe, is higher than it's ever been. And when you talk about general risk assessments of when is that more likely to happen, it's not difficult. When you look at these dates, it's not like a go back and look at the news on these dates, but think about of all people, he's kind of a moron. I don't have a major. I did block him because he was just annoying. But Canadian Prepper sort of makes this point, and I only say it because some of you are. I'm not recommending. I'm just. This happens to be someone who made this point. Um, that at any point, any of these exercises could turn into something real, which I took issue with it because of the way he's saying is like he's telling his audience, well, you have to listen to this because any of these messages could actually be real, and like we don't know. It's like that's not no, that's not the right. The risk is, as with Able Archer 83, adversaries look at these exercises and perceive it in that sort of a way. They do see it as a threat, and I do think everyone is more antsy. So in the context of what I'm talking about, like, it's just I cannot is it I cannot overstate or understate. I cannot overstate how frustrating it is to realize how wrong people get this stuff. Like entire nuclear exercises are missed. And again, Jessie caught it, and she deserves props for that. That's very surprising, and she's done a few more posts, which she's not made it like her main thing on her over on X, and I don't imagine she would because it's not a very wide appeal topic, though it really should be. But the brain trusts were like, I know the HFGCS, I'm the for I was a US whatever for 20 years. Why are you missing these? Like these matter. Like it's not a threat to your life. Like those guys who made you watch their stream saying, "Oh my goodness, this thing is happening. You have to log on and buy my prepping, bucket of slop right now." It is happening. It is not a drill. No, it's a drill, but it's all like it is the drill. It's the drill that you should be paying attention to. And like I said, I can't pay attention to all of them, so that's why I did this stream. Next few days, but maybe even next week. I don't. April is tricky. That's why I put like April mess. It's a mess. It's the April one is weird. I don't know if you guys remember the April 2024. Like this dragged on. This was a mess. Like this was probably the most time I ever had to spend like just transcribing EAMs. I think this was like it was literally like 40 hours that week just listening to EAMs and transcribing them and then doing those live stream. It was madness. I think last year was like incrementally better. But, this could turn out to be a mess. Like, this could drag on for a week and a half, regardless of that thing the Offit said. Did we look at this? It doesn't matter. But they said it's supposed to end Friday. It might, but you have those airspace reservations extending into the weekend now, so I don't know. I don't know why it's showing me all these ads. I don't have an ad blocker. Sorry about that. Well, I have an ad blocker, but not for the browser inside OBS, so we'll hide that so that they don't get free advertising. They have to pay me for ads, and they're not paying me. What do we have right now? So these are military aircraft for the U.S. I mean, I've always been honest. This just looks like a lot of planes to me. I don't necessarily have a lot of insight. I'm sure you guys want to look at planes in other parts of the world. Yes, there are things going on. Yeah, I'm aware. We're all aware that there's things going on. But I continue to be disappointed and frustrated by open source intelligence's inability to assess that the U.S. military can do more than one thing at a time. Believe it or not, the U.S. military can walk, talk, and chew bubblegum all at the same time, but you wouldn't know it. And I'm not even trying to throw shade, but I am not happy about it. It is what it is. Okay. Are there questions from folks? I may not be able to answer them in a satisfactory manner. I can try. If there are no questions, there's no pressure as such. I'll check Twitter. I don't know if anyone is asking me anything. Yeah, if I have time, the vague posting will continue. I think vague posting rocks. If you don't like vague posting, that sucks. If you're doing it for the bands, make it a little. Try and make it a little bit more obvious, like so that there's some way I can just vague post in response to your vague posting. Um, like one guy's getting very mad at me right now. It's like I don't know what to do. I can't play off of this. You seem very angry. Let me see if I can just read one off verbatim. I'm not going to put it on screen because it's angry. Yeah, why broadcast an exercise? And this man is saying for I can't use these slurs on YouTube, so for unintelligent people like this, and then he's saying, "Wow, we read him the weather. This is outstanding stuff." I'm gonna answer it truly is. Dakota asks, thank you for your question. When did E6s begin flying without hex codes in your tracking? So as far as began to like actively notice it, there is I don't know if I can, how do I do this? There's a video I did in early 2025. That's last year, right? It's 2026 right now. Let's get this up on screen. Yippee. I mean, you don't have to watch the video, but I want to make sure that I have the date right. Where is that? I haven't watched it in a while, though, so I don't remember. So this is just a general rule of thumb. Yeah, so in very early January 2025, I made a video asking, are the E6s flying dark? Which means they must have already been doing it for a while. But I think it was not new that there would be cases where you can tell a Mercury E6 is airborne, or at least, seems to be airborne, especially when you kind of compare across SDRs. You'll hear an E6 broadcasting in EAM, and you can kind of tell, well, it must be over the Pacific because all these SDRs on the East Coast hear it pretty well. Now, maybe some of these were just sitting on the ground and practicing broadcasts. I can't say for sure, but there would also be like airspace reservations for, the Atlantic. So it's a lot of hoopla to just give the impression of broadcasting from the air, and you know what I'm trying to say. So that wasn't new, but what started happening was they were flying with, these fake hex codes. And I think there was always a little bit of that. But it must have been late 2024, and like October, November, December, where it started to become the thing where they're using these fake hex codes and an increasing rate of E6s not showing up on flight radars, even though I can tell that they are airborne or something. And there also started to be some Skymasters where it's like, it sounds like there are more planes active than are showing up on flight radars. So that was late 2024, early 2025. So kind of a year and a half now. At least then it's been obvious, because I can't discount that it wasn't happening to some degree before and I just wasn't familiar enough. But at least a year and a half, the E6s began to do this mysterious stuff. Thank you for your question. Eagle and Snare, is there any connection to current events such as Iran, or were all of these exercises scheduled ahead of time? So these exercises, like a lot that the U.S. military does, whenever they do acknowledge these exercises, which is rare, but when they do acknowledge them, such as when they talked about Global Thunder in October of last year. Do I have that right? Is that the right one I'm thinking of? Hold on. I just want to make sure that I'm not mixing up talking about like Global Lightning when it was actually Thunder or something like that. Yeah. So they publicly acknowledge these ones ahead of time, which is quite rare nowadays because they've stopped talking. Like, they did not mention these Greenland ones. They did not mention the Faroe Islands. They didn't mention most of these. Um, there may have been some public acknowledgement of, like, from local bases that there's an exercise going on, but these actually got, like, public release statements ahead of, like, if you go on off Air Force Base, they have, like, news section in the thing. They mention those, and then at the bottom they say, this is scheduled ahead of time. The same way they do with, like, all of the Minuteman missile tests. Those are, I think, actually quarterly. The page is not going to load if I try and click it. It's an OBS issue. It's not an actual website issue, but that one gives you the dates of Minuteman missile tests. And those have a lot of press releases, and those all say at the bottom, this was scheduled years in advance. It is not a response to anything ongoing. And you can take this at face value because it's not for you and me. It's not for Johnny Q YouTube's live stream or you that's bored on a Wednesday night. It's for both adversaries and allies. Like, for example, it's for Russia in a sense. What do I mean by it's for Russia? So I'm the United States. I have all these treaties with Russia. It's not just Russia, by the way. This is an example. I have all these treaties with Russia. I'm also not in, a great relationship with Russia right now. Russia is a nuclear capable country. Perhaps I am notifying them ahead of time. By the way, we told you this, 5 years ago, but we are going to have an exercise next week. If relations with Russia aren't, like, really good right now, like, let's say we're talking, April 2022, you're sort of having this conversation with Russia, and, like, Russia just started this special military operation. I'm doing air quotes, by the way, into Ukraine. And, like, if you be like, oh, we're doing some nuclear stuff next week, but it's just a drill. Like, don't worry about it. It's just a drill. Russia is going to have a hard time believing that. Unless you have something like this going, where it's like, well, okay, they're telling us they're going to do an exercise in April. And you know what? That does check out, because for the last 3 or 4 years, they have been doing these exercises in April. So, like, it's not in response to anything that we're doing. In terms of right now, it's very difficult to use Iran as an example because we're actively attacking Iran. So that's not a great thing. But, like, China or something right now, if there is an exercise this week, if there isn't this sort of, like, heads up, like, the U.S. could be like, hey, by the way, I know we're having trouble with your proxy, but don't worry, like, this is a scheduled exercise. If you didn't have this, like, prior buildup, they would probably have a very hard time believing that. And then if you proceed with your exercise, they're more likely to perceive that as a threat. I've said this before, but I'm not replicating, like, my peer, in terms of the sort of effort and things I've been doing. My peer is not like the other OSINT accounts. Like, I'm not doing what they're doing. I'm doing something very different. I'm actually probably doing something much closer to a component of, like, what a foreign intelligence officer is doing for, whether it's a Russia or an Iran, or, like, heck, even if, like, for an ally. Like, they're intelligence officers in the United Kingdom or France or Germany who probably have to do a little bit of this just to keep a tab on what exactly is the nuclear environment right now. And, the U.S., they're formally peers, and the U.S. can say, oh, no, it's an exercise, but they sort of have to verify for themselves. So, yeah, these exercises have to be scheduled ahead of time, in effect. It makes, I know people will read that and be like, oh, that's not true. But if you think about it, the whole thing falls apart if they're not scheduled ahead of time. Well, it doesn't completely fall apart, but yeah. And these airspace reservations, I think that they're put together so ambiguously that it's becoming increasingly difficult to tell exactly what day it's pointing towards. I think that's more for the sake of the exercise, and the people who are involved in the exercise. This is a guess. I don't know. But it's probably not helpful for the exercise if a soldier or whatever rank, other than the guys who are designing the exercise and put it together, if they're able to just look and be like, oh well, we're probably not going to have to do anything until Friday or Saturday. This sort of throws off some element of the preparation. So I think it's ambiguity more so for them, although there could be an intentional ambiguity for anyone who's watching. And as I just said, with the expiration of New Start, and we're entering a very different environment, they want people to know there's an exercise ongoing, so there's enough there that's visible that I can, if I can still see it, that means the people who they want to see it can definitely more than see it. But I do get the impression they no longer want it to be super obvious. Now that could change. I could be way off. I don't know, but that's my impression. Thank you for your question. South Coastal, do I have a Discord or IRC channel for discussion outside the YouTube videos? I used to. People, I didn't actively. I was about to say it wasn't very active, but people might criticize because I didn't actively promote it. And there's some truth of that, but Discord / IRC. And everyone uses Discord now. Discord. There's something about that app that encourages the worst in people. So like I use Discord, but my experience with Discord is like any server you're on has like 50 splinter servers, and everyone's constantly like arguing with each other. So I saw like there are people, they were not good at hiding themselves. There are people who are like in my Discord, and anytime I posted anything, they have their own little YouTube channels with their own social media accounts, and then they go and tell these preppers, like if I post something, they have their accounts that are spying on me. They take it and post it on their channel, and I know about this because I have to have accounts in their server spying on them, and they're spying on me. I'm spying. This is nonsense. And that's not just like this is like almost every Discord server or community I've been involved in. It just quickly becomes this sort of nonsensical, silly stuff. So I don't like Discord. That's why I didn't actively promote it. It would be nice, because there isn't anywhere normal to discuss. There are normal places, but they're not active. I used to post on hfunderground.com. That's a forum. Posted there recently. There's also, what is that place called? Radio Reference? Let me check. Yeah, radioreference.com has a forum. I've posted a little bit there. A lot of these, radio guys aren't necessarily interested in the HFGCS. So, someone's mentioned 4chan. I used to be on 4chan. I miss 4chan. 4chan is basically dead. Like their running Sky King thread is not so good. Nobody knows what they're talking about, and I just sort of I think in February, around the same time as I decided to take a break from everything else I said with this, I'm going to take a break from posting in the ongoing Sky King threads on there. So there's nowhere great to discuss these. You could try on the existing forum. There's also secret forums, which genuinely, like I said earlier in the stream, if you were present, they don't like me. I don't even know which forums there's like one secret forum that I became aware of, and like I applied, and I didn't even like say it was me. I just applied under like a generic name because I knew they didn't like me, just to see what they're talking about. I was not invited. My application to their secret forum was not accepted, so I don't know what they're talking about. But I'm not too broken up because, like I said, they missed it. Like they this was not a hard Sky Master event to monitor, and they missed a lot of these, by the way. It's just like harder to prove because I put out enough information that they can kind of be like, oh, we knew about that, and then you get into that kind of game. So it's not like I'm not upset that I'm not invited into these secret forums. I'm upset that these secret forums are even more insufficient than I assumed they would be. That's what I'm upset about more than anything. All this LARPing and pretending they know, they don't know anything. So I don't know of anywhere I can recommend you to go to talk about this stuff. Like, you can go and talk about stuff, but you can't necessarily have a conversation. You know what I'm saying? Like a post on social media. There are news groups. People like using news groups. Most of them don't get scraped by Google, and right now that's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing in the sense that everything online is being scraped by, well, people scraping things so that it can feed it into their AI. I was on the Kiwi SDR forum earlier, just like lurking to see what they're talking about. Not an active participant on there, but a lot of people are just like slamming the Kiwi SDRs with like various recorders, and they're just recording everything they can. And it's like, I don't know why they're doing that, because that's pretty hard to feed into an API or AI or anything. Um, but yeah, they're just scraping the hell out of everything, which is causing problems for everyone. So if you want to have conversations and not have it scraped, I would say use a news group. But also, like, you don't show up on Google. You don't show up on Bing. A lot of people care about Bing. Um, no, they don't. I don't know. I'm being sarcastic about Bing. Bing.com. Bing. People don't use it. Most of those are just like, you know, you hopefully some of this stuff, particularly like this stuff, if I'm willing to put it out there, I think it would just be nice if it does get taken up and someone in the future, if they're interested in the HFGCS or the EAMs, like they can find this stuff and be like, oh, this is super cool. I want to do this. Or, oh, that's okay. Good. Thank you. And they can kind of move on instead of having to do it themselves for 4 years. So, to answer your question, I answered your question in a weird way, but yeah, there are places to discuss it, but no. And I stopped promoting my own thing, which I was never super keen on promoting, anyways. In terms of promoting things, because someone's mentioned Wolf again, it's been tricky for me to figure out how I want to do that, because I am aware I'm a contentious figure, even if these people don't directly confront me. Like, there's enough little burbling and seething on the periphery, and especially now that I'm vague posting, like a lot of people are saying, why is this guy changed and why is he acting differently? It's like, no, I'm doing what I always said I would do if things went a certain way. But obviously, most people perceive that as a change, anyways. So it's like, well, if I say, oh, go check out Mr. 123, people will be like, well, I don't want to check out Mr. 123 if Neat Intel is recommending Mr. 123. And Mr. 123 may not like super like being endorsed by Neat Intel, because that may create an impression that Mr. 123 is endorsing everything that Neat Intel has ever had to say, particularly, when it comes to complaining about the whole of open source intelligence or ridicule. It's tricky. So yeah, like when I endorse someone, like I have to be aware of that. But I did mention Wolf, because Wolf has been mentioning me more than a few times. Whenever I'm lurking and you mention me, I'm like, oh, that's nice of him to have said that about me, or whatever it is. But there's some other people where it's like, well, first of all, well, no, this is like fifth of all, because I've been talking for a while. I almost, I've found this so difficult, having 20,000 followers and 7,000 people on the. That's not even that many people in the grand scheme of it's a decent size for Twitter. Um, but this has just been a headache. It's really mostly been a headache. It did not pan out the way I hoped it would. So it's like, why are you recommending these people you like if they've only got like 500 or 1,000? Why are you wishing upon them what you've had to deal with? So it's kind of, if when I recommend people, or rather more specifically when I don't mention someone, um, that has been my thinking. So if there's anyone who's like, why doesn't he ever like talk about my what I've been doing, or my channel or whatever, the incidental retweet is more than enough, I think. And if people see what your posts are and I retweet you and they end up following you from that, that's super great. Um, but if I'm like, hey, go follow, like I did one today, and it's like, I don't know how, I might even end up deleting that, and that might cause a whole hill of beams of problem on top of it. But it's like, I don't want to enthusiastically endorse anyone as such because it's like, well, it's not necessarily a blessing to have 10,000 followers. It's a bit of a headache, I think. So why am I doing that to you? I think along those lines. With all that said, once again, not that one. What is it, an underscore that I forgot? Yeah. Wolf is a good guy. Wolf obviously wants a larger audience, so that, check him out. Like I said, he's just like a chill. Like he's live streaming now on both YouTube and on X. So you can just tune in sometimes. He's just chatting with people, and he's covering the news generically. There's other people. Is there an underscore for S2 Underground? Yeah, there is. And he's got a much larger following than me, so it's like I hardly need to shout him out, but he can handle I don't know how many people are watching. 10 people? Don't tell me. I don't want to know how many people are watching. It's going to be a low number, and I won't be happy. He is a very good. Yeah, it's not showing his most recent, but if you check him out, he does like a daily news aggregate, and analysis. So if I like vanished, or if I was like, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but if I had to like recommend one channel or project or thing to follow for people who are interested in like the news, it would be S2 Underground. Like if I ever like vanish from the, if I ever stop doing this entirely, but I'm still like incidentally monitoring the HFGCS and I think there's something crazy, I'd probably, if anyone, be inclined to submit something to him as a tip. But I've had some interesting conversations with him where he sort of said, ongoing monitoring of the HFGCS is not going to be an active priority, in part because of the very issues I've had. It just doesn't make sense, and that's completely understandable. Lookner has never, by the way, Steve Lookner has never done a live stream or anything about the HFGCS, which poor old Steve. You guys should, if any of you are regulars, tell him to monitor this stuff, so you can have him go like, I have to take a break. I have to eat something. I haven't eaten all day. There's an EAM, but I have to go eat. No, his audience would be bored to death watching this stuff, right? What else? I don't think there's anything else to say. Oh, right, we're just doing questions. If there's any more questions, great. If not, I've been at this for... Someone's making fun of me. I have... It's in... Someone's saying you have a lot of free time over on the social media. It's like, yeah, it's neat intel. I have to go put my yeah, I mean, he's a Steve Lookner, bless his heart, I guess. Yeah, I've been at this for over an hour and a half, so if there are any questions, I guess pop them off on social media. I will try and write something up if I have time tomorrow, because obviously if English is not your first language, or I mean, it doesn't matter if English isn't your first, but if you're not fluent in English, especially with all of my hemming and hawing and tangents and umming and Lord knows what, it's difficult to follow what I'm saying. So I will try and write something for the international audience. Oh, and this will be the last thing. We'll leave it with this. This will be the last thing I'd like to comment on. After doing this for so many years, I was hoping that there would be... Oh, there... Okay, there's a question. So I'll answer your question, then I'll kind of have this last comment. Southpod, thank you for your question. Is there any kind of EAM that would concern you if you heard it? Um, it would just depend on the context. Bear with me. Oh, these won't load if I click them. Hold on. By the way, this is neatintel.github.io. If you do hfgcs.com, it'll take you to that. hfgcs.com will take you to the GitHub now. But back to your question. So is there any kind of EAM that would concern me if I heard it? That's not going to work right now, is it? So like some of these EAMs are super weird. I can't use the really long ones. Maybe this is a decent example. So this it's a longer EAM length. It's 108 characters, and when you click through this, you can sort of see that there's a structure to them. It's a very weird structure. 108 is a very weird one. Because I've been looking at this one, really staring at some of these, being like, what is this? Why do they have it set up like this? Now, some of the other EAM lengths, I think 120 is a good example. No, but it won't load on this constrained window. Yeah. So it's just I'll have to find a different example for you. Is that a good example? No, it's not. Okay, this is a good example. So this is a little bit of like second or third year EAM understanding, but like this is just a length of message. When you split EAMs up into groups, there's different structure. Group 2 looks different from group 3, and so on. Now, I don't think this is unclassified, but you can sort of see with these EAMs, like look how similar these are to each other. The highlighting is very similar. You've got the same letters in the same positions. These all look very similar. So it's like, well, if I've heard this EAM, this first one, and then I hear another one, and like the structure is pretty much the same, that I'm inclined to be like, oh, that must be like similar behavior. So it's not surprising. And I've got 3 of them, which basically confirms like, oh, it's the same structure over and over and over and over. So that's just what 63 character EAMs look like when they're in this grouping. And then this one in April 2025, which is a conspicuous timing, completely breaks the structure. Like it doesn't look like the other ones. That sort of gives me pause to be like, why is it like that? That's weird. It should not be like that. Should I be like, what exactly is going on there? What the spruce? But obviously the world did not end on April 14th, 2025. So, and nor did I suspect on April 14th of 2025 that the world was about to end. So it's like, well, I don't, concern wouldn't be the right word if I heard that kind of EAM that doesn't match what I think it should look like. And when you go through these pages, you'll be like, oh, how come there is like, why is there you have 84, 85, 86, 87. Why don't you have like an 88 character EAM? Does that mean, if you heard an 88 character EAM, you would freak out? Probably not necessarily, because it just means, even if you monitor the HFGCS for like this many years, you just might miss ever hearing one of that length. So that wouldn't freak me out either. It would really just be the overall context of what I'm hearing when I'm hearing it. Why isn't this working? Because like a real EAM probably does not look very different from all of these, what we can assume are like practice EAMs or exercise EAMs. You know, when you're learning how to do anything, like you don't, learn how to ride a bike by swimming, or you don't like practice learning how to ride a bike by, walking. You have to actually pedal so that when you do have to ride your bike, you know how to pedal. I can't think of a good example, but it's like these are what like a real EAM would look like. This is what they will sound like. This will probably be their structure for whatever the length happens to be. And outside of like a context, it will be hard to identify the EAM you should be freaking out about. So it would really depend on the news. And the news is not, that there's a war ongoing in Russia, or, that we're attacking Iran, or that anything is happening as such. You would probably know already. Like, there would be something intimated to you on, the TV or the news, which would be saying that we are close to nuclear. Like, the CBS would be talking about, I don't know why CBS comes to mind. The news, like the real news, not me, not Joe Kooky Prepper YouTube channel. The news would be talking about this stuff. And then you would be listening to these things, and then you would be saying, this one might be this. And you probably wouldn't be listening because, as I've said, like if I thought these were real, I would not be running a live stream. I would be doing other stuff, and you'd probably be doing other stuff. So you probably wouldn't even hear the real one. It's a bit tricky to explain. It's not a simple question, unfortunately. But thank you for your question. Yuska Trading asks, hello, neat intel. Can you elaborate on the September 11th EAM? Not at this time. I don't have the stuff put together. You'd have to check other live streams. I don't even remember which one it was, but there was a message sent to submarines on September 11th, 2001. And if you look around online, I don't know if I have it. So the HFGCS wiki was a thing I had to abandon because it was taking too much time. I was like, as I've said with other stuff, I realized like, oh no, this is taking too much of my time. And I just had to like scrap it. I don't know. Let me see. Okay, this one should work, but I have to manually enter the URL. So if you click the archive link for the emergency action message article, when do I talk about September 11th? It's slow scrolling. Why won't you work? So if you pull this up, the article for emergency action messages, it has links to this. This probably won't load. This won't load because it's a PDF. I'm in the OBS browser. Yeah, it's just going to be a pain to get there. But if you click those links, there is some documentation from the United States military, some stuff that was declassified, and it confirms something about that EAM on September 11th, and it was something. Thank you for your question. I'm sorry I don't have like a straightforward, thing that I can link to right now, but I had prep. I used to have notes for that. I used to have stuff pulled together, and like a lot of stuff for the last, couple months in particular, I had to like just scrap it because I'm spending too much time with this stuff and procrastinating. But that information is out there. Not to a super exciting level of detail, but yes, there was an EAM on September 11th. One Chopsticks asks, has there been any kind of consistency over dates that would indicate it not being a one-time pad? Yes. Yes. And no. Yes and no and no and yes and so there's multiple ways to answer this question. I'll offer a few suggestions. So one way of looking at this is that this alone, like when these structures are able to be identified, may suggest on its own that like, well, if this was a one-time code message, you should not have that. Like it should be pure entropy. I shouldn't be able to identify these structures or patterns like this. However, another way of looking at it is this could just be like padding or spacers or something that you use to align to make it easier to decode. And all of this stuff that like doesn't have a structure, like this could be one-time pad, this could be one-time pad. But I would disagree with that and just say it doesn't logistically make sense. One-time pad is sort of like it's not theoretical because obviously there are messages that, one-time pad messages do go out over the radio. Like secret agents do deal with one-time pads. But what it means to be like a one-time pad is you send out a message once to a single recipient who has a single thing that they use to decode that, and then afterwards they like destroy that. And it's like a really strict definition where you're like, well, what if I give, one agent in, I'll pick examples. I'm Russia. I have an agent in the United States, and I give him the one-time pad, and I also have an agent in, I don't know, Australia, and he has the same one-time pad, but like they're destroying the books after they use it. Like it's not leaked. Like those guys aren't even interacting with each other. And strictly speaking, no, that's not a one-time pad because you have two people using it. You have two recipients for one message. Like that's not one-time pad. And that's sort of people would really argue with that and be like, no, like it's still one-time pad. And for that alone, like we have a bunch of EAMs, multiple examples where they will say it's for multiple recipients. So that can't be a one-time pad. The other thing, like, there are days where I don't have anything uploaded right now that I can point to, not on this website. Some days there are like 2 EAMs, and you can manage like a one-time pad for that. But there's also days where there's like 30 or 40 EAMs. Like one-time pad messages are usually done by like, yeah, you have an agent, like you're Russia, you have an agent in West Germany, and you like smuggle in an almond, and he opens the almond shell, and there's a little scrolled up paper, and that's his one-time pad, and then you broadcast a radio message like later. You do that like once a month or something. You don't do that frequently because if you have to do it more frequently like that, like it's such a pain. So it would just it's not the United States doesn't it's impractical for what this system is actually for. They also don't need to do it. Like if there was a reason they needed to do that, the United States military is more than capable of doing that, but they don't need to do it that way because you can use sufficient levels of encryption that it can still take someone like months or weeks or years to crack any one message. And at that point, it doesn't matter. What have you, like, what? Meetup point, like, let's say one of these messages, I don't know, decodes to like a simple English, like meetup point Charlie. Okay, like that was broadcast, April 15th, 2026, and you've broken it in 2029. Like, it takes you 4 years to crack this message. Okay, what now? Like, what are you talking about? So they don't need to use one-time pads. It's a pain to use one-time pads, and as is going on in the chat box, there are more than a number of examples where it's like of things that are like made that are presented to a general audience where it's like it doesn't make sense. Like, that's not one-time padded. It doesn't need to be one-time padded. So there have been a lot of guys over the years who've been like, "This is a one-time pad. What are you trying to do? What are you decoding these messages?" No, I was never trying to decode these messages. I never assumed that you could decode these messages, but it's not because I think they're one-time pads. And I don't even know, I don't believe this automatically proves that they're not one-time pads, but there is obviously a structure. And all those people who told me that it was illegal to do this, well, they said two things. One, it can't be done. Obviously, it can be done. Here it is. It's staring you right in the face. And they also said it was illegal and I would go to jail if I did it. I don't think they'll let people run YouTube streams from prison, so I hope that's sufficient proof that I did not go to jail for this. But your question was more, has there been any kind of consistency over dates that would indicate it not being one-time pad? I don't know if dates would necessarily. I sort of talked around that question, but I think I did answer it, I guess. Thank you for your question. This will be the last question for the night because we've been at this for 2 hours. But Random Gamer asks, and thank you for your question, what do you define as a happening? Different people have different thresholds for what they consider a happening. I'm curious what yours is. So my sincere personal opinion of what a happening is an event such that you don't have to go to work tomorrow. Now, obviously, you can call in sick and then you don't have to go to work. Like that's not a happening. But I mean, happening came from like 4chan, and a lot of the guys who are like wishing for happenings are accelerationists in the sense that they want, society, like they're not happy with the current state of society. They're not optimistic about it getting better, so they would like things to get very bad very quickly, so that like there's some sort of like global change in how we perceive things as being like to our benefit or not. So like a happening is like a bombs drop on you on your city, and you get drafted into a war. And you can really get into the philosophy of this because there are multiple parts of the world where there are happenings. If you are in Iran, you've just gone through a happening. I don't know if I should mention this. If you are in Beirut, you just went through a happening. I found out someone that I went to high school with passed away when Israel bombed, civilian apartment buildings in Lebanon. I would say that's a happening for him and for his family. But if you're in the United States, like that doesn't count as a happening. Your life hasn't changed. Like nothing's happened to you. So these people who go online and say it's happening, wait, what's the game you're playing? This is silly. So I have a very strict definition of happening, which is, if you die, that's a happening. If you are killed in the war, that's a happening. But most of the people who are just posting about happening, I don't know why they're posting about it. So it's not a helpful definition of happening, but I also just online, especially now that I'm vague posting, I will use the average person's, nonsensical definition of happening. So it's happening. Oh my God, run for the bunkers. Thank you for your question. That's a weird one to leave off on, but it might be what we leave off on because I really do have to wrap this one up. If you've been watching from the beginning, bless your heart, I guess. I don't know why. Listening to me rambling for 2 hours. If you got anything out of this, that's wonderful. I guess, like, as a quick recap, I feel like it's fairly obvious that something is lining up. I cannot guarantee you that I will be available to stream And even if it turns out, like, let's say tomorrow, I'm not necessarily busy tomorrow, but I really do have other things I should be doing, so the live stream will be on, but I'm not going to actively comment or anything. You will see me being a jerk on Twitter. That's fairly easy to do if I have time, but yeah. So that's it for me. Let's all find other things to do with our time. And I won't say until next time, so I will just say for now, bye-bye.